No kid's Jewish education should end at 13. Adjerba offers Ontario high school credits infused with Jewish learning online for teens across the province. Ministry approved, intellectually demanding, Jewishly transformative. Adjerba.ca. That's ADRABA.ca. Your teen belongs here.
Hey everybody, I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. We are the Menschwarmers.
Jamie comes back after a small hiatus where I guess several days in Los Angeles, as far as we can tell.
Yeah, that's right.
Winning 3 games of Jeopardy. So congratulations and welcome back, Jamie. Welcome back to the Menschwarmers. Thanks for the mention on the show.
Our returning champion is James Hirsch from Toronto. You're a lawyer and a podcaster. Tell us about your show.
Yeah, I host a podcast called Menschwarmers.
Menschwarmers?
That's right. It's a play on Benchwarmers. It's about Jews and sports. My friend Gabe and I co-host it. And we've had a great opportunity to talk to lots of Jewish athletes, Jewish sports writers, people involved in sports in all kinds of ways. We've been doing it for 7 years now.
If you're a new listener that came from Jeopardy, we're thrilled to have you. And if you're a new listener that didn't come from Jeopardy, welcome as well.
Yeah, nice. I'm hoping we have some new listeners generated from the shout out on the show. Gabe, I believe you were specifically shouted out as well, as I saw your mom's Facebook comment.
My mother was thrilled. Absolutely thrilled.
That's why we do it. We do it for the nachas.
We do.
Nachas.
That's why we do any of this.
Yeah. So yes, thank you if anyone's listening for the first time or joining us, having listened to some of our older podcasts. Glad to have you. We usually try to meet every few weeks, talk about some news in the world of Jews and sports. Sometimes we have special features, special guests. Today is one of those sort of, reset. How's everything going? What's been going on in the news episodes? But yeah, it was exciting to be on Jeopardy. Obviously, the last podcast that went on our feed was my interview with Ellen Besner of the CJN, talking about my experience. So take a listen to that. If you have any questions, take a listen to that. I did have someone call my my work phone number last week to ask how to listen to the podcast.
Oh, that's terrific.
So
did you take them through the podcast app as a concept?
Yeah, I mean, he seemed of a certain age that he didn't necessarily have a podcast app on his phone,
right?
Or have a phone that was capable of downloading applications. So I told him to Google Menschwarmers. I think that's a good tip for anyone. It's been a few weeks since we last spoke. The last thing we talked about was sort of Olympics hype and players, and we were excited to see. And I think the Olympics ended on a very Jewish note.
It did. So before we get into the final event, we missed a couple of Jews. 2 in particular I want to mention. One, Scotty James, Australian snowboarder, converted when he married Chloe Stroll, Lance Stroll's sister and Lawrence Stroll's daughter. We've talked about the Stroll family at length. And another one I'd like to mention, it's unconfirmed, but the government of Israel seems to think she's Jewish, which we're cool with, is a German bobsledder, Deborah Levy. She was a pusher.
I really don't think she is. I remember looking into this ages ago, and I really don't think she is. Her last name is Levi. I mean, it is a pretty Jewish name, but I couldn't find anything confirming that. So if anyone has any information on
exactly, if anyone knows how to sort through German obituaries to find, her parents or anything like that, she, at the very least, like most athletes, she doesn't have a Philippians quote in her Instagram, which is, the first rule. She passes that. As well, certainly other people, including, like I mentioned, representatives of the Israeli government seem to think she's Jewish. So I'm excited to hear, if any of our listeners have any more Olympians we missed.
One other Olympian we missed was Avital Carroll, who's an American-born skier who skied for Austria on the moguls, and said that she did so to honor her grandmother, who fled, Nazi. I don't know if Nazi occupied. She fled Nazi Austria at the age of 7.
Yes.
And Avital Carroll, returning to get her citizenship through Austria and switching to Austrian citizenship to compete. A good Jewish sports story at the Olympics. But yeah, it did end on a very Jewish note. Who was that Olympian who ended the Olympics?
Who was the Jew? The Jew who ended the Olympics was American hockey star Jack Hughes.
Back was McKinnon in front. Shot scores. Jack Hughes has won it for the United States.
who, and exploding all over the news. Everyone, his Jewish heritage was talked at length, but with, missing a broken tooth hanging out of his mouth, he slid down the ice and fired home a 3-on-3 winner, passing over the shoulder of Jordan Binnington to win the gold medal, the first gold medal for American hockey since the Miracle of Ice of 1980, on ice of 1980, beating the Soviets and then the Finns, and they beat Big Bad Canada. Jack Hughes, really probably the biggest story of the Olympics coming to the end, and it came from a Jewish guy, and a guy who was proudly Jewish, talked about the importance of his Jewish heritage. And similarly, his mom also won a gold medal as a coach of the women's team.
Right.
So we've got gold medals from mom, Ellen, brother Quinn, and the hero overall, brother Jack. There's sort of an iconic photo of him now, smiling with a bloody face, holding an American flag behind him, which is going to be the cover of every Jewish sports legends book from here on out, I think. Sandy, watch out, because we've got the golden goal scored by a Jew. Pretty exciting stuff for us.
Yeah, very exciting. I mean, I think obviously in Canada we were disappointed to see our team lose, but some slight pride at least enabled to witness Jack Hughes win it for the Americans. And I do think big moments like this, showing Jews on a big stage is great. I think participation in all areas is great. We saw the Israeli bobsled and skeleton competitors, make it to the Olympics. This sort of travail of just qualifying in order to get there, and the inspiration that makes for young Jewish athletes, I think, everywhere, of what you can do if you set your mind to it. And also seeing guys who, commit their whole lives to playing a sport professionally and competing on a professional and international stage is pretty exciting too.
And, he was the first Jewish first overall pick as well. So this has sort of been coming up from Jack. It's we've talked about it being Basheret. It sort of is that he would be the hero in such an event like this. As he's been, not saying ordained, I know we don't really use that word as Jewish people, but this has sort of been in the stars, Basheret, for him at least, which is, it's very cool to see, and very cool to see, he is everywhere. We've got arguably the most famous athlete in America for a full 2-week news cycle was a Jewish guy, and a proudly Jewish guy, which we don't see very often. It's as sad as I am as a Canadian to have lost that game. That's the one guy I would have been the most thrilled to lose to, as long as it wasn't a Kachuk brother. That's item one. Right. Item two is that it was one of the Hughes brothers, who are, theoretically the opposite of them in Judaism, of course. Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we'll be seeing him in the playoffs. New Jersey's, I think, a few spots out. Mm-hmm. In terms of just a little hockey rundown, is there anyone, as we're going towards the end of the season, people should be focusing on? I know Edmonton's, trying to hold on to a playoff spot now.
We'll
see Zach Hyman.
Jack's brother Quinn, as we've talked about at length, was the biggest trade done in the NHL in decades. Traded from Vancouver, the worst team in the league, to Minnesota, a pretty good team. And he's been pretty much the best player in the world since that trade. Quinn, as Jack's heroics, Quinn is as good of a player, if not better, and plays a really specific role, a revolutionary role. There hasn't been defensemen like him in a long time. And now Minnesota is a very clear Stanley Cup favorite, led by Quinn. He's immediately become the leader of that team. And they're right now, if they're not the odds-on favorite, but they're really up there to win the Stanley Cup. And it would be extremely cool. A big year for the Hughes brothers. Only a handful of guys ever have won a gold medal and a Stanley Cup in the same year. And I think he would be the third or the fourth, which would be really big for Quinn Hughes.
Yeah, and his Team USA teammate, Jeremy Swayman, who started most of the games for the Bruins, who are trying to hold on to a playoff spot. But I think there's probably a feeling that, if they do make it in, they have a decent chance of making a little run in the playoffs. Yep. Bruins are sort of perennial contenders. Team maybe isn't what it used to be, but I don't know. The East doesn't look great this year, so certainly a possibility that they have a decent run.
It's extremely likely. And they could go pretty far. The Wild right now are set up to play Dallas in the first round, who are sort of a perennial almost there. But so are Minnesota. So it'll be really cool to see what happens. And, Quinn, it might be the guy that gets them over that edge. But, definitely. Moving on from hockey, we are recording this shortly after one of the biggest games in Israeli baseball history, probably one of the biggest wins in Israeli baseball history, at least. What happened on Sunday against Dusty Baker's Nicaragua squad?
Team Israel into the win column. A 5-0
win against Nicaragua. They qualify for the next World Baseball Classic.
Israel won 5-0. It was a very solid win. Lots of contribution up and down the scoreboard, and just sort of like a gutty team win. It was the win that will secure Israel's future in the WBC, at least to the next appearance. And I think it was done on purpose. Dean Kramer, who is
I was about to ask.
Far and away.
Yeah, do you think they should have started Dean against one of the better teams, or try and get that one win against Nicaragua?
So this is a tough question. So let's just give a little context here. Israel is at the WBC for the I think third or fourth time in a row. It has had good results previously, but last time was not great, except for a win against Nicaragua. They're in a pool again with Nicaragua. They're in a pool with Dominican Republic and Venezuela, who are certainly Dominican Republic might as well be the 27 Yankees, given the lineup they're putting out there. Venezuela's a pretty solid team. Netherlands has plenty of Major League Baseball players on it, even without disgraced PED user Jurickson Profar.
Yes.
But in order to qualify directly for the next WBC, Israel needs to not come in last. And they did that by beating Nicaragua.
That's right. They need to come in at least fourth in their pool of 5.
Yeah. And as we're taping this, they have lost to Venezuela. They lost to the Dominican Republic yesterday. They'll be playing the Netherlands today. They can't qualify for the next round because Venezuela and the DR both went undefeated so far until their game with each other. And yeah, Dean Kramer is obviously their ace. He's a very solid, middle of the rotation arm.
Major league pitcher on a good team on Baltimore.
And he went out there and got the win.
In the playoffs in 2023. Yeah. He is a key part of their team, their ascendant team. No question.
Yeah. And I think pitching is something that's sort of a problem for Israel as the team currently stands. Yesterday, Ryan Prager went out there. He's a recent draft pick, 23-year-old guy. I think he has a future ahead of him in baseball. But he was facing, again, a murderer's row that you couldn't believe. And he walked 4 guys and then gave up a grand slam to Fernando Tatis Jr. So, what can you do? I think the hitters are good enough for Israel. It's just the pitching needs to get there. We'll see what can be done in the next 3 years.
And they had an unfortunate reaction. One of their better relievers, if not their best reliever, Robert Stock, who is likely to play in the Mets this year. Another young guy who was looking forward to making a pretty big debut. I think he hurt his oblique in a warm-up and is out indefinitely. So, the World Baseball Classic giveth for these guys, and it also taketh away.
Yeah. But the bats are there, and the bats will be there in 3 or 4 years. Spencer Horwitz had a home run against the DR. Harrison Bader and RJ Schreck, who's a Jays prospect, had home runs against Venezuela. I think the bats, the fielding is good enough. The pitching needs to be developed a little bit. You can imagine having Max Fried on the mound, for example, if he had chosen to join.
Having Dylan Cease would have helped.
Yeah, those two pitchers could have won a game against Venezuela, and Israel would be talking about going to the next round. So, a disappointing tournament, I would say, in total, but not unexpected. And, great to see Israel there and the team sort of representing on a huge stage. And they'll be back in 3 or 4 years whenever the next WBC is. It's always sort of a mystery. I would say there's 2 other Jews competing and who will make it to the next round. Yeah. Alex Bregman on Team USA and Rowdy Tellez on Mexico are both moving on. I think Mexico has to beat Italy tomorrow night.
Which though Italy's sort of a surprise. And I have to say, as Jewish fans, we should appreciate Italy's commitment to their ethnic pride. I mean, and it's also mostly filled with North American players who happen to be of Italian ancestry. Right. And to see how much they celebrate that, they're similar. It seems like it's been discussed online that the Jewish team, the Israeli team, does a snipping motion when they got on base towards the dugout, sort of somewhat of a circumcision joke, just like the Italians do both an espresso sip and a Mamma Mia hand, like the little pursed fingers thing. That if somebody hits a home run, they run back to the dugout and do a shot of espresso in the dugout in a part. And so, you got to really enjoy this, even though not all of these teams are competitive, they're still really happy to be there and having a blast.
It's true. And I suppose if Italy beats America or Mexico in one of their last 2 games, they will be on to the next round. So if Mexico can beat them in a matchup of red, white, and green supremacy, then Rowdy Tellez should be on to the next round. And Bregman's Americans, I think, are among the favorites to make the finals to win. Obviously, the American squad's pretty good. I think the DR is an insane lineup.
It's insane.
Just like
Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
home run
doesn't have to play. That's how good it is. Is that they can rest him.
So we'll see what happens there. And we'll see what happens with the 2028 Olympics. I mean, I don't know whether Israel's road to qualification is going to be easy. They announced that 2020 Olympic baseball is going to be a 6-team tournament.
Yes.
Which sucks. That's what it was for 2020 in Tokyo. The last time there was baseball. And, one of the spots is already taken up by the host nation. There's, I think, 2 American teams that qualify, 1 Asian team that'll qualify automatically, which I believe I gotta imagine will be Japan.
It has to be Japan.
A European. There's 1 spot for European /
and
Oceania
Israel would
team.
have to win that tournament in order to get in, like they did last time.
Yes, and then there's a final qualifying tournament probably for the runners-up of the Asian and American and European teams. So again, Israel is now pretty solidified. I mean, among the European teams, it can compete. It can compete with the Netherlands. It can compete with Great Britain and Italy. I think I would put it above Spain and Czechia and some of the other smaller country teams. But it still would need to go out and win, and putting that team together and it's hard to get major leaguers to make that. It's hard to get even minor leaguers to be on those qualifying teams. It's really you don't necessarily get the team that will participate in the Olympics qualify.
It's at the same time as the baseball season. However, since the success of hockey, and I think Jack Hughes made this a conversation, guys like Bryce Harper are talking about, we need to get major league players in the Olympics. We need to take a month off or 2 weeks off to get everyone to play together. Like they saw Jack Hughes be the most famous athlete in America. I think Bryce Harper's dreaming of hitting a walk-off home run for Team USA. Or Alex Bregman is dreaming of hitting a walk-off home run for Team USA.
So we'll see. We will have some MLB preview, I'm sure, in our next episode. Got a couple weeks before the season gets underway. Lots of Jewish ball players that we haven't talked about already that we want to highlight. Before we go, Gabe, I want to talk about a few more things. One of them is a little bit of a sad note, but Jewish golfer Daniel Berger kind of blew it last weekend at the Arnold Palmer. He had the lead and he didn't win. Let's put it that way.
Yes. And it's an amazing comeback no matter what happens. Remember, he missed 2 full seasons a couple of years ago with really, really severe back injury. He then came back and started on his medical exemption and re-exempted himself to the PGA Tour, got into signature events. He's back in the top 50 in the world and had a chance to win $4 million and made it to a playoff, sort of lost his way into the playoff. Although it is to be said, the guy who beat him, Akshay Bhatia, shot 31 on the back 9 of a Sunday of a big tournament, which is pretty unbelievable.
I was going to say, when you're on a par 5 and you birdie, and the guy who you're playing with eagles and almost albatrosses, like almost gets it in from 220 yards away. It's like, well, you didn't do anything wrong, and that's golf sometimes, right? Like,
as good as Berger was, unfortunately, Bhatia was just a little bit better.
Yeah,
and that's
what happens with golf sometimes.
But Berger will be back. It's the Players this week. He's tend to play very well in Florida in his career, his home state, sort of like a other coast of Max Homa, who does well in California. And there's a couple of Jews going this week. Obviously we've got a Berger and Homa, as well as Max Kreiserman, who hopefully between the 3 of them will get at least a couple of good results.
Yeah, I think Berger has sort of set himself up well. We'll see if he plays all the Texas tournaments. I think often they play sort of similar to Florida in terms of the grass and whatnot. So we'll see. The Players obviously a big challenge with the best field in the game, but if Berger can, now that he's sort of recovered physically, if you can get the mental focus there and get what it takes to narrow it down. He's a guy with wins in the past. Like he's a guy who's shown before that he can have 4 rounds in a row that are excellent. And his opening round at the Arnold Palmer was one of the best rounds anyone's ever played there at Bay Hill.
He almost won it wire to wire. And to do that, to be under par for 4 rounds and finish that good and get into the playoff, like at that point, it's almost a coin flip. Bhatia did some heroic things. If Berger was there, he'll be back. And I think that's what we can look forward to as golf fans and be excited for him. He's a well-liked guy on tour. People are very happy to see his comeback. Unfortunately, it's a really tough game, and you don't know when you're going to string 4 days together again like that. But it's probably going to happen for him again. He's won big events. He's won Pebble Beach in the past. Doesn't have a major yet, but he's seen as sort of one of the better 30-year-old golfers in the game. He's got a lot of career ahead of him.
I think that's absolutely right. And, now he's solidly back into the top 40. If he finishes out the year with a few more top 10s, that'll mean, making all the signatures next year, making all the majors next year as well. And just sort of, putting yourself in a position to compete. I want to see him win again. This is the second. I think he finished second at was it the Phoenix last year?
It was the Phoenix last year.
Yeah.
And he holed out on 17 to get close.
Right.
They're chipped in. I think there's something kind of like, it is dark, but maybe it's a silver lining I'm grasping for here. Often guys with bad back injuries go one of two ways. Either they can never get it back again, like somebody like Will Zalatoris, or they completely retool their swing to put less weight on their back, like Tiger Woods. And he won a lot. So Berger can go one of two ways after a bad back injury like that. It looks like he's going the second way, which is a good thing. His results are very, very good without a win. And it looks like I said, if this continues, he'll be in contention many years down the road.
Absolutely. I want to touch briefly on the NBA, which recently saw the return of Denny Avdia. Mm-hmm. Denny missed, I think, 7 or 8 games. I think he played like a minute in a game before hurting his back, and is now back. Is now returned to playing for Portland.
Double back.
Came back last night in a win against Indiana. And, even though there's like 20, 15 and 20 games left for every team, like things are pretty solidified in the playoff standings in the West, because like a lot of teams are just tanking. So it's almost certain at this point that Portland will have come in either 9th or 10th and be in the play-in. Like, I think Memphis is like 7 games back and, has lost 4 in a row. Dallas is a shell of itself. So it's just like, there's no one to really compete against them. And those teams want their draft picks. Whether Portland, can pass Golden State or the Clippers to make it up to have a better play-in spot, we'll see. And it would be really cool for Denny to make a playoffs.
It'd be extremely cool.
I think we're still waiting for an Israeli player to play in the playoffs. I know Omri Caspi was on a Warriors team, but I don't think he actually played.
And we had Jordan Farmar, as a Jewish player in the playoffs, but that's not the same. That is not, it's the same, but it's pretty up there. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day about whether or not there were any Ashkenazi basketball stars of the modern era. And the closest we could come up with was Jordan Farmar.
Well, Danny Shays, or I don't know if that's quite modern.
If you go further back, back in a former, guest on the pod, even Dan Grunfeld, he was an Ashkenazi player. His grandma was my dad's teacher in high school, so in New York City.
His dad, Ernie Grunfeld. Dan was our guest on
Ernie's
the pod.
mom was the teacher. Danny's grandma.
Right. Checking in with our other guys. Danny Wolf, I think, could fulfill his potential. He is a almost 7 foot tall redheaded Jew, and he has had a sort of up and down rookie season. Mm-hmm. He's gotten into a bunch of games now with Brooklyn. He had a 23-point night the other night. He went 14-9 last night as we're taping against Memphis in a win for the Nets. And I think he's solidly getting minutes and will be part of their team. Ben Seraph, his draft mate, also on Brooklyn, has been spending more of the season in the G League. Mm-hmm. Has gotten into some more games recently, but again, he's 19 years old. He was picked as sort of a development prospect in the first place. Whether he can continue to develop and have a bigger role next year with Brooklyn, we'll see. But solid years for those. And I would say boom times for Jews in the NBA as far as it goes. Denny's first All-Star selection. If we can get Domantas Sabonis to convert, if we can confirm that he's
on a better team conversion. The rumor was he was converting Orthodox, so maybe that takes extra longer. I don't know. I have not converted. I don't know people who have done that kind of conversion before. Maybe that takes a little longer. We'll see. But he's still going to play on Shabbos, at least as far as I can tell.
Purim, I think that conversion's a whole Megillah. Exciting stuff for Jews in the NBA, and I think the potential Israel basketball team in the future is not bad. Could
make the second round of an Olympic tournament.
Standings. Yeah.
It's
who knows?
I do also want to, I'd be loath to mention without going, because it was Purim, as you mentioned. We like to talk about this a lot, but someone who people think is Jewish, but turns out not, we like to call them Mike Jacobs All-Stars. And the current Mike Jacobs All-Star for Purim, who I just spent the last few days watching in person, is Blue Jays shortstop and spring training breakout OPS over 1,000 Josh Kasevich.
Right.
As far as we can tell he is not Jewish. Similarly, we've got the Mormon pitcher for Team Canada, Micah Ashman, was asked specifically by some CJNers if he was Jewish. He is not. He is quite Mormon. Although some Mormons have Jewish names. He's not the Jake Retzlaff of BYU, as his parents were both BYU players. But we've got those two. For my time down in Florida, I got to see pretty cool players, but Mike Jacobs All-Stars, not quite Jewish.
It does seem to be the case. Josh Kasevich has wedding photos where he's not wearing kippah. That's the best we could do in terms
That's the best so far.
Can't harder to prove a negative. No Philippians quote in his Instagram bio, but no information that he's Jewish. And we wish him well as Jays fans. If not part of the other J team.
I just feel like if he makes the team, we're about to get asked this a lot. And
it's good to get ahead of it for people listening in minute 25 of the podcast, or however far in we are.
Just want to get ahead of it. If he makes the team, he very well could. We'll find out in 2 weeks. He's been getting a lot of playing time with the entire infield down at the World Baseball Classic, and he's making use of it. Keegan Matheson said the other day he thinks he's going to make the team, and he knows. But Jews aside, getting ahead of that, not Jewish.
Yeah. This Sunday, we will see the Oscars and the Jewish nominated film, Papillon, Butterfly, that we talked about in our most recent podcast. I talked to one of the producers. We'll be up for the Oscar for Best Short Animated Film. So we wish it all the luck. I've gotten some great feedback from people and who have been able to check out that video. I think there should be a link in our show page for that episode.
I think so.
So check that out if you haven't. It's a short film. It will not take a ton of your time, and you can be at an Oscar party and be the one person who knows the short film category well, or at least has a rooting interest in one of the short animated films. So
that's very. In addition, as you watch the Oscars, from about a month ago, we had an interview with the Globe and Mail critic Barry Hertz discussing all of the Jewish themes in Marty Supreme and how he thinks it is a Hanukkah movie. What's interesting, there's lots of discussion of this. You can, if you listen to that episode and hear the conversation, you can make the argument at your Oscar party that Marty Supreme is actually a Hanukkah movie. I know that there's been some discourse on the movie about whether or not it is a Zionist movie. My sister is of the strong camp that it is, and she is very happy about it. She thinks it is a very good Zionist movie. So that's one argument for it. And you guys can discuss these interpretations of Marty Supreme and its Judaism at your Oscar party after listening to our chat with Barry Hertz.
Yeah, pretty solid Jewish sports film Oscar year, as we talked about. Jerry Bruckheimer's produced F1 is up for an Oscar. It won't win Best Picture. And all the Marty Supreme Oscars, Timmy may walk away with it, maybe not. Seems like things have cooled a little bit on him in the Oscar hunt and Papillon. So, unfortunately, despite our campaigning, Happy Gilmore 2 was not nominated for any Oscars.
Yeah, Benny Safdie for Best Supporting Actor.
Maybe some Razzies. Do they still have the Razzies? I feel like there might have been some Razzie awards for Happy Gilmore 2, least necessary sequel.
I know Adam Sandler really liked getting his Razzies.
Oh yeah.
So if they still do them, I'm sure he would be there to get it. But it's a good question. It was the best Jewish sports film that Adam Sandler was involved in since Uncut Gems, which was the best Jewish sports film Adam Sandler was involved in since the hacky sack tournament in You Don't Mess with the Zohan.
Yeah. Watch Marty Supreme if you haven't, guys. I recommend it wholeheartedly. It will shockingly fill your heart. I don't know what else to say. And I think there are parts of it that Jews will understand that nobody else will. And
I'm sure you could reach out to me or my sister, if you can find her, to discuss the Zionist themes in the movie. Before we go, I want to give one quick shout out. Quick mazel tov to our producer, Michael, who is not available today. We have a replacement producer, Zach Kaufman. Michael has just, shepherded the birth of his third child. Not saying he's given birth, but Michael and his wife have had their third child, their second boy. So big mazel tov to Michael.
Yeah, mazel tov to Michael, the unseen third chair of the podcast.
Yes.
Absolutely. As always, we are produced by the Canadian Jewish News. You can find our podcasts and articles on the Canadian Jewish News website, thecjn.ca, and follow us on Twitter @Menschwarmers. Thanks for listening.